Hey, how you doing? This is John. Welcome to John's Long Box. Today we're going back to the X Men. It's been a while since I looked at the X Men. This is the Uncanny X Men number 168, 60 cents. This is 1983, and this cover is by Paul Smith, but that corner box is by Dave Cockrum. This this was like my interest in the X Men was waning down to the point where I quit X Men around not around at exactly 204. That was my last issue. Although I think I have up to 400. I bought them in collections years later. So I make no bones about it. The John Byrne, Chris Claremont X-Men were not only the best era of X-Men, but I think some of the best eras in comic books in general. And the momentum from that era was going strong. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let's open this up. It's in pretty good shape. We got Cracker Jacks. So we got a Cracker Jack ad. Something that you will never ever see if you slab this comic. And Professor Xavier is a jerk, which I totally agree with for various reasons. But let's look at the creative team. So we got Chris Claremont writer. What can I say about Chris Claremont that everybody else and their brother hasn't already said, and their sisters too, because Chris Claremont's out. I first became aware of Chris Claremont writing the X-Men. So I became a Chris Claremont, like, I don't even want to say he's a fanboy, because I was a fanboy at one point. When I say fanboy, I mean I just, on sight unseen, I just buy it, just because of the name. But I was a Chris Claremont fanboy, but then he's burnt me a few times with other comics, so I kind of like buyer beware kind of thing. But I loved him. He could do no wrong on the X-Men for a long time. Jeez, I think around 74 to now, so we're going on like 10 years. That it was just sight unseen, Chris Claremont, you buy it. But since I started doing this channel, I've been looking more critically at comics. You know, before I did this channel, I just was whatever I liked. It was all emotion based. I like this or whatever. I'm trying to be a little bit more intellectual. I'm sure you could argue that I'm failing, but I'm trying. I didn't realize how much Chris Claremont stuff I liked before the X-Men, like Marvel Team Up, like Iron Fist, things like that. And every once in a while, an odd comic will show up, like an Avengers Annual or something like that. Paul Smith was a rising star. He's like a comet. He shot up and then kind of disappeared. I did one of my earlier showcases was Leave It to Chance, which was Paul Smith's baby. I thought that was an important comic. I thought that should be like a Disney movie. It should be like, you know, everybody's favorite thing, but it kind of came and went. Go to my back catalogs. I think it's, I forget, Independence or something like that, but Leave It to Chance. It's just a wonderful comic. Came and went. I could go on and on gushing about Paul Smith. Great writer, great artist. But Leave It to Chance was his original work. Bob Wiacek, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. I really do like Paul Wiacek's inks. He like brings out the best in every artist. Some inkers kind of just overpower their artists and you know, muddy them or whatever. Paul Wiacek, I don't know. He's like a chameleon. He just like adapts and makes things better, which is what an inker should be doing. Tom Orzowski letterer. I hate to say it, but like good lettering is like unnoticeable. You know, bad lettering is like super spectacular lettering is noticeable, and bad lettering is noticeable. So, you know, what do you want me to say? It's an art form that's supposed to be just like, I don't know, functional and utilitarian. But as you can see now, like he's doing this lettering, showing you how big it is. But you know, so he does his job. He's a professional. Glynis Wynn, the wife of Len Wein, colorist. You know, I really like, she's up there in like the top 5, top 10, you know, yeah, I'll say top 5 colorists. I really like, this is old school. You can tell it's old school, you know, because you don't have the gradations. You know, you have the orange and then also becomes yellow. You know, you don't have the computer blending like it. Louise Jones. Who's Louise Jones? Well, she was the editor who got the X-Men from becoming just a one monthly comic to a franchise. And then she went on to write the X Factor and so much more. Who is she? Well, she becomes Louise Simonson. Louisie. She marries Walt Simonson, and they're still together. They're like one of the great comic book love couples, you know. If anything happened to either one of them, or if they broke up, then love doesn't exist. But you know what I mean. They're like comic book fairy tale romance. but she doesn't exist, as my running joke is that there was no women in comic books before 2016, when all of a sudden identity politics infiltrated comic books. But one of the most important people in comic books, Jim Shooter. It's funny because Jim Shooter, till this day, you mention his name and people just have like a gut visceral reaction to him. They just don't like him. I was not there. I never met the man. I just see the work, and the work is outstanding. And like they celebrated when Jim Shooter was fired. They all went out to dinner. They had a big party, and like they told Jim Shooter horror stories. Again, I don't know if the man. I just know the work. The work is outstanding. I don't think Marvel has ever got to this creative peak that it was under Jim Shooter. Maybe Art Through Adversary is a real thing. I'm going to say that. But I could sing the praises of Jim Shooter. He was the editor-in-chief. He was the boss. Before that, you had like Roy Thomas, and I can't even think. I think Len Wein was the editor-in-chief for a while, and it was just like a bunch of hippies. There was no editorial control. There was each there was like little camps that they did what they wanted. There was a lot of like deadline dooms. Comic books weren't making their deadlines, so there were a lot of reprints inserted into issues. Inventory issues became like inventory issues. Like if you got contracted to write 12 issues, you wrote a 13th issue, and that was just in case something happened. They could quickly insert this, so it was just like a one and done standalone story. A lot of them were being used because there was just Marvel Comics was run by pot smoking hippies. What do you want me to say? All right, yes, 1983. So we got Charles Xavier as a jerk. I will go further and say that Charles Xavier is borderline a supervillain. I'm that fond of the character of Charles Xavier. For many reasons. I keep threatening to do like an expose episode of a very special episode of John's Long Box where I talk about my problems with Charles Xavier. That would require too much work and getting out too many comics and bookmarking, and so maybe I'll just talk about it. So this is Alanya Rasputin. This is Kitty Pryde. Why is Xavier a jerk? Well, in this particular, he's not a jerk for lusting after 16-year-old girls. He's not a jerk for telling the X-Men to go capture arrested and arraigned and about to stand trial mass murdering supervillains and then harboring them. He's not a jerk for forming a segregationist nation that threatens the other nations of the world, and he's not a jerk for taking cannibal serial killers, and then harboring them because they're not going to stand fair trials, but we just want to be treated like everybody else. He's a jerk for actually doing the correct thing in this particular instance, is taking the 14-year-old Kitty Pryde and telling her that she's got to join the New Mutants rather than the X-Men. Even a broken clock is correct once or twice a day. So she's just like, yeah, well, that stinks. Now we're on the same team. She's like, cry me a river. Cry me a river. I've been abducted and abused by a demon from another dimension who may or may not have possession of my soul. you just went onto a different team. So, Alana just shuts Kitty down, and then they go ice skating. Meanwhile, we got this demonic wing figure. Look at this. Just watching what's going on over here. And we got Wolverine's going on vacation to the Canadian Rockies, and Nightcrawler is being the buddy. And he's just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go see my girlfriend, Amanda Stefton, who, at one point she was a super powerful witch. At another point she was a hostage. Go figure, And they're talking. And I love how they keep the decor of the X-Mansion pretty similar through the John Byrne years, through the Neil Adams years, and now the Paul Smith. I don't know how long Paul Smith actually stayed as the artist, but there's a lot of visual similarities behind the camera. I told you a few times that this ad just irrationally bothered me, and it's funny now that I laugh at. I was a weird kid, guys. What do you want me to say? This ad, just to show you, I keep talking about how I hate people when they self-diagnose. I got PTSD. No, you don't. No, you don't. You were just late for work a few times. And you got yelled at. You don't have PTSD. You weren't in Vietnam. There's a legitimate medical condition. You don't have it because your mother woke you up early for school. But so I'm not. I hate self-diagnosis, but I do think that I had a obsessive compulsive impulses as a kid. I'm not self-diagnosing. I'm just, laughing at myself. But when this ad came on, I would stop and then read it and then get angry. It's like I had no control. I had to do it. This in the gum fighter ad. I don't know why. So here we got, they're just talking about, they're contemplating a buddy trip. Wolverine and Nightcrawler. And then Wolverine's just like, nah, I want to go. At this point, Wolverine was like a wild man. Like, I know he's supposed to be a wild man now, but like, we're talking like an uncivilized savage at this point. So he wants to go and just run around naked in the woods and yell and scream and kill animals and drink their blood kind of thing. He just wants to be a wild animal. And so he's saying like, thank you for wanting to come with me, but I need to be on my own. So that's when Nightcrawler is just like, okay, that's cool. I could dig that. I'll leave you alone. I'm going to go visit Amanda Stefton. But that would have been a cool little buddy trip. And how this is a memory hold storyline. So Xavier has a cloned young body. Okay, so he's like not much old. Well, mentally, reality-wise, chronologically, he's an older man. I don't know how old he's supposed to be. 40? I don't know. But his body was destroyed and it was cloned by Shi'ar technology. So he's not much older than the X-Men. And then we forget about it. So that's one of those things that we kind of lost track of. Excuse me while I take a sip of coffee. So who is Leandra? She's the ruler of a space empire to rival the Kree. In the space hierarchy of Marvel Comics, there's the Kree that may or may not be the most scientifically advanced empire in the, I'll say the neighboring galaxy, the neighboring universe, pardon me. Then we got the Skrulls, and now the third is the Shi'ar, and the Shi'ar is more benevolent than bad, depending upon who you ask. And they evolved from like bird-like people. The Kree are like humanoids, but for whatever reason, they no longer evolve. It's an interesting story. So the Kree have reached evolutionary dead end, and they're dying out. So there's blue Kree and there's pink Kree. There's like Caucasian Kree and there's blue Kree, and whatever. I don't know why I'm talking about the Kree when it's the Shi'ar. But long story short, they made her up as like a retroactive device. So what happened in the comic books was they decided that Charles Xavier has outlived his purpose, that the concept of the teacher student model has run its course, that the X-Men have graduated and are moving on, and having a teacher kind of holds them back. So they killed off Charles Xavier. This was like around, I don't know, like X-Men 50, X-Men 60, I forget the exact number. Then they ended up regretting that Charles Xavier died, so they retroactively created a mutant called the Changeling who transformed into Charles Xavier, and then that mutant died. But that begs the question, where is Charles Xavier? What happens is, then they retroactively said, well, Charles Xavier sent out his mind, like sometimes he'll do like mental exercises, and he was contacted by this alien intelligence, Leandra, and he fell in love. And he went off to do space lovey-doveys with Leandra. So there you go. So she ended up just being like Charles Xavier's, having sex with space aliens. And then they made up there. And then she grew into her own interesting character on her own. And that's like it became like a crutch. Where did all the technology come from? How do they have danger rooms? How do they have all this? Well, it's from Leandra. They share Shi'ar technology. So Xavier must have like terrestrial like patents on like so much cool technology, which is why the X-Men have so much funding. So now he has a new cloned young body. It's limited, but his brain keeps telling him that he can't walk, so he can't walk. And he eventually starts walking again, and whatever. And comic books are funny that way. That's like one of the weaknesses of a long running. The status quo has to be restarted every once in a while. So she's like, "Oh, my love, you try to walk, but but isn't this art glorious? like, I will say that there's a little, using the same shade of green so often is a little, not like a little amateurish, but whatever. Glynis Wynn knows better than me. She knows colorful. So Kitty Pryde, one of the things that Xavier did that so he's doing two things that I like in this particular issue. He's putting a 14-year-old kid on a kids team, which he should have done from the beginning, but there was no New Mutants at when Kitty Pryde was introduced. And Kitty Pryde likes to dance. She was a dancer, and they gave her a dancer's body. Not nowadays, she's like, I guess, well, nowadays she's formless like all women in comics. But for a while, she became like a va-va-va-voom girl, but she wasn't supposed to be. She was always supposed to be skinny, small-chested, plain, and cute, and cute. But, so she's a dancer. So Xavier signed her up with a dance teacher. So Stevie Hunter is the X-Men's private dance tutor. And Alondra joined, so she's alongside the character. I don't know, I kind of, like I said, I kind of quit, I quit cold turkey at a issue 204. I think I'm up to 350 as far as reading, but as far as hardcore fanboy collecting, that's at 204. I did a stop. I just couldn't take the X-Men's hypocrisy anymore, and the wallowing in identity politics. Even back then, even as a kid, I didn't have a term for it. I couldn't explain why. It just bothered me. Right, like, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I think she's been like turned into some sort of like super Avenger or whatever mutant. I don't know. I like everybody, like it's almost like being a mutant is like a communicable disease. Anybody, if you spend enough time around them, you get mutant power. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know what happened to Stevie Hunter. She was an interesting character. She was a no nonsense, tough teacher, which is what Kitty needed at the time, and. I kind of liked it. She yells at her, calm down, you're being a spoiled brat. Okay, now let's do this, and inspires her and gives her, a little lesson over here. Then we got Storm. I like the winter is coming. No White Walkers, but Storm. Every once in a while, they just show like she enjoys weather. Whether it's harsh weather, whether it's, as long as it's natural weather, she's going out and enjoying the cold. And I gotta say, I hated it as a kid, but every once in a while, like, especially now that I have my own backyard, you go walking outside in the cold, brisk, cold. You can see the frost on the grass. It is nice. So what does she do? She's just taking a nice moment of peace. So before I go any further, let me just explain that the issue before this was just like a climactic battle. The issue after this is it starts a whole nother story arc. So they will have that kind of like these like little like breather issues that I really enjoyed. And they were like character issues. I guess that's why I picked this without even thinking. I just remembered liking this issue. So I was like, I'm going to take X-Men that I like, because I don't know if I've explained this in a while. I've seemed to have gotten a lot of new viewers. I tend to showcase comics that I enjoy. This is about the enjoyment of comics. So if I show a comic that I do not enjoy, it's to make a point. So I guess, I don't know, I didn't realize that I had like a fondness for this. So she's outside, like I said, enjoying everything. The sun's rising, and she's stripping down il natural, in the nude. So she's just walking around naked in the woods behind. She's supposed to be upstate New York, like Westchester area. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the area, there's the 5 boroughs. It's almost like Manhattan is, there's a bottom triangle of New York. The 5 boroughs are at the bottom. The Westchester is up here. And once you get past the 5 boroughs, houses could have a lot of property. So the X-Men mansion has it's bordering like a forest. And that's completely normal in that part of New York City. Once you get out of the 5 boroughs, it's hillbillies and rednecks. It's really funny. Like, everybody thinks of New York as skyscrapers, and opera goers and whatever, hipsters with their glasses hanging out in coffee shops, whatever. But 99% of New Yorkers are like more similar to farmers than not, and I think that's probably true in most states. But New York, it's like once you get out of the 5 boroughs, maybe once you pass like Yonkers and get into the Westchester area, we're talking like rednecks, and I'll throw myself into that category. I don't think redneck's a bad term, people who work with their hands. I'm one of those people. I'm a construction worker, so I feel I got more in common with rednecks than and it's funny because I used to be a school teacher. I went to college. I wanted to be a college professor, and now now I'm enjoying rewiring my house and things like that. But anyway, back to Naked Storm. So Naked Storm is just walking through, enjoying it, and all of a sudden the storm comes, a little storm, and she didn't know it was going to happen. Now she has some sort of like empathic connection with the weather, so she knows that I could she knows when weather is going to change. She knows when it's going to be a nice day. So this is completely taking her, and she's freaking out. She's cold. She's comfortable. I don't know if they talk about that a lot, but Storm is comfortable in most normal weather patterns. So she's actually cold. So she's like, what is going on? This is not natural. So now here we got Kitty is going on what's called the Charm Offensive. She's going to explain logically to Xavier why she should be in the X-Men, not the New Mutants. So she's showing like spirit. So she's trying to change his mind with logic. Now passion, she's just arguing with him. Cooperation. Now she's like, oh, look at me, I'll help out, I'll do whatever I want. And now flattery. Oh, look at my handsome professor over here. She's doing whatever she can to persuade, whatever works, right? Now here is another chapter of the X-Men that I enjoyed, and it's kind of forgotten about. Cyclops kind of left the X-Men around 138, after the death of Jean Grey. He's always been like, one way or another, he's always been with the X-Men, and I totally understand. He's just like, my love of my life just died, and I don't know who I am outside of X-Men. So he's he went off on his own. And then every once in a while, every couple of issues, they'll say, hey, what's going on with Scott Summers? So what on with, and then there'll be like an issue of just Scott. I should showcase that. Oh, I love that issue when he meets Man-Thing and the Demon Despair. Oh, such good stuff. But anyway, I digress. Focus. So he got like a job on like garbage scows and tow trucks and stuff, which is one of the things my friend did. Yeah, I should talk about him one day. He's very interesting. My friend. Oh, same guy. If you've watched my videos for a long time, I talked about my friend Randy who got into Ayn Rand. That has nothing to do. His name is Randall, not anything. But anyway, I digress. But he got a job out doing the same thing in the Gulf of New Mexico. So anyway, I can focus, breathe. Scott Summers. So here's Scott Summers. He's who am I kind of thing. He's on like a quest. So he goes back and he meets Lee Forrester. Who's Lee Forrester? Personally, she was my favorite of all of Scott's girlfriends. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I got in with her on the ground floor. Like I was collected monthly when he met her. But let's be honest. There's something sexy about a girl who knows her way around tools. And don't be dirty. I meant tools. She's a mechanic. So she's like a no-nonsense business owner, works on ships, takes. I love that. That's my favorite trope type in real life. That's just cool and sexy. So he meets Lee Forrester. He kind of left her. Now she didn't know that he was the mutant Cyclops at first, but they got shipwrecked, and because it's a comic book, so she learned all about the X-Men and who he was. So she's not yelling at him for disappearing. She's happy that he's alive and healthy, kind of thing. She knows that they're from different worlds. So whatever. She's meeting up, and he wants closure. Is that the correct word? He wants to say goodbye properly. He kind of just disappeared, which is a Scott Summers thing. He just disappears. So here they are, walk along the beach. I always love this. And they're talking about how their lives are different. They've grown apart. Neither one of them is angry with each other. Could they rekindle their relationship? Let's not talk about that now. Let's just see what's happening. And he's saying that he wants to go to Alaska. That's where Scott Summers grew up. His parents were from Alaska. So he's like, I think I want to go back to Alaska, Anchorage, and that's where I was born. Scott's looking for a life. He doesn't have a life out. He's been basically a child soldier. So now who's this? Amanda Steffen. She's a stewardess. Airlines, and then there's Nightcrawler. And I think, if I may be correct, this is the first appearance of the Banff dolls. This issue has a lot of first appearances, and I do like, he's setting up all the candles, and there you go. Now, this is kind of creepy because this is his stepsister. You know what I mean? So there you go. Just like every Pornhub video. And here she is. She's doing the homework, feeling all defeated. Here's Colossus and Magic, Peter and Alanya, and they're going up. I just love the little touches. I love the little touches. So she's like, what's going on? And she's picking up some sort of computer irregularities that's going on. So she's going to put on her costume and go investigate something that she saw on the computer. And she's making a rookie mistake. She's not alerted. And then Xavier picks up her thoughts, and she's telling him, I'm going to go investigate. And what is it? It's Lockheed. Dragon, is it really you? So she saw Lockheed before, but this is not like their formal introduction. And this is the beginning of so I thought I'd left you behind on Sleaze World. I thought you'd been destroyed along with the planet. Sleaze World was the Brood. She named them the Sleazoids, which is one of the worst names. I'm glad that name didn't stick. And but she's supposed to be a 14-year-old girl, and now she's picking up these aliens from X-Men 154. They've been hiding at the bottom of the X Mansion for whatever, and now they're discovered. So what does she do? She gets hit. She's jarred. It severs her rapport with Xavier. She's on her own, just her and Lockheed, and now they're fighting this bug-eyed monster. She's getting blasted, and she's feeling cornered, and boom, Colossus shows up. Boom, and now Colossus is taking him out. She's hugging Colossus. You remember at this point they have a crush on him, and then Lockheed, whose little size and cuteness belies how powerful he is. So Lockheed takes care of it, and then Xavier is just like, you know what? You went down, you faced a monster by yourself, which in my mind is reckless. Okay, you could be an X-Men because you're reckless. Again, I'm not a big fan of Xavier. And this always looked like one of my friends, Joe. We used to goof every time we went to the comic book store. This was just sitting there for years. We're like, hey, Joe, you made the cover of Blip. And he would get irrationally angry, which means we had to tease him more. That's just the rules when you're a teenage boy. Some Dungeons & Dragons. Excellent. I love that. Again, this is the kind of stuff you do not see if it gets slabbed. So now he says goodbye to Lee. They leave on good terms, and as far as I know, we never see Lee Forrester again. It was a satisfying goodbye. Whatever. He goes to Anchorage. He wants to get a job flying planes like his father. And by the way, nice tan. Is that Corsair? Is that his father? I kind of forget. Is he meeting up with his dad, who's one of the Star Jammers, or is that just another guy? And what does he meet? Madeline Pryor. So this is the first appearance of Madeline Pryor. She looks just like Jean Grey. Is she or isn't she? It takes years for that story, and it becomes super complicated. Super duper deluxe complicated. And it turns into... It turns Cyclops into one of my favorite superheroes of all time. I love the idea of the guy driven by duty and duty. The guy driven by duty, will, and responsibility. So he's a hard ass. He's a hard nose. He's a stuffed shirt, whatever you want, a wet blanket. But he understands that he has responsibility because of his eye blast. He could kill people. He could destroy mountains. He could ruin entire cities. The fact that Cyclops even lives in a population zone is irresponsible. He should be in Alaska. He should be where less people are around, because if he drops his glasses and opens up his eyes, boom, boom, he could, less population density, the less people he hurts. So he's a guy that's living with this awesome responsibility of the power that he holds. He, like Black Bolt is another one that I just love. Like Black Bolt's voice is even worse than Scott Summers' eyes as far as destructive capabilities. So by not his fault, not anybody's fault, whatever. It's just the way nature made him. He has this awesome power, awesome responsibility, and he has to have a super, super difficult will process to control it. So people call him a stick in the mud, and they bust his chops, but it's kind of like he's playing the cards that he was dealt, and I always like that. He's dealing with an awesome responsibility. Why it took me so long to come up with the word responsibility, I'll never know. But that's his problem. Black Bolt, Cyclops, guys. But then he meets Madeline Pryor. They get married. They have a baby, and he promptly abandons her. As soon as Jean Grey is found alive, Scott drops all of his family, just drops his child, and runs off. I firmly believed it was an editorial decision. He was going to be with Madeline Pryor, and I think they were going to, retire him off to the sunset and keep him as this peripheral character. That's what I think was going on. But then I don't know who came up with the idea of X Factor, where they were going to put the original X-Men back together again. Once they brought back Jean Grey in the worst way possible. I've talked about that a lot. If you're interested, I'll bring up why I still think that the Jean Grey, they had, I guess I'm talking about it now. Jean Grey's name was Phoenix. Phoenix's powers is they resurrect themselves. That's it. She comes back to life because she's the Phoenix. If you have Spider-Man, if your name is Spider-Man, you have spider powers. If your name is Wolverine, you got Wolverine powers. If your name is Phoenix, you get Phoenix powers. One of the Phoenix powers is resurrection. So that's it. Jean Grey should have just came back to Earth, and then a timer goes off, boop, 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 through no fault of anybody, but it can be accelerated through trauma, like the Hellfire Club did, and she explodes, gets killed, and then starts again. So she is just, in my mind, an inevitability of destruction and rebirth. Instead, they came up with the Phoenix Force, and she no longer has agency, and it's outside of her hands. And, oh, God. But anyway, they brought her back with the stupid Phoenix Force. It was never Jean Grey to begin with. It's just horrible. I think it would have been more pathos, more dramatic if they left Jean Grey knowing that sooner or later she's going to turn evil and explode. Oh, God. But she's their friend, and they want to save her. Oh, God. I'm so... It's one of the big things in comic books that ticks me off. Anyway, back to Madeline Pryor. So I believe that they were originally married off into the sunset. Then they decided to bring back Jean Grey. And then once Jean Grey got back, we got to bring back the original X-Men. So I think editorial, they pulled it. Now, I think the fan backlash of, like, what? Cyclops is abandoning his children? He's not a hero anymore. This is like, bad. This a lot of people just like, geez, he's supposed to be a good guy and he just abandons his kid. So no, she's the Goblin Queen. It was always a setup, and I think that was just to absolve Cyclops of the fan backlash. That I can't prove it, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Then we have this little interesting Kitty's Costume Corner. So these were fan costumes that were made. She was supposed to be like a 13, 14-year-old girl when she was first introduced, and she made silly costumes. So the fans were sending him silly costumes. I think that's kind of neat. Cash and prizes. And what is this? Network. Oh, it looks like an Atari games reactor for... What system is this? I don't even... Parker Brothers? I don't even know. Looks like Atari from the joystick. So there we go. X-Men 168. I liked it. This is, this was the beginning of like identity. There always was. Don't get me wrong. X-Men was born with the concept of we're different, we're the other. But the other was anything. The other was comic book fans. The other was the introvert. The other was the guy who just didn't fit in. It was never stated what the other was. So therefore, you could put whatever you wanted on it. I thought that was brilliant. And then even Stan Lee, around issue 14, he said this whole mutants versus humans thing is tiring and cliche, and sales were going down. Don't forget that X-Men was a bottom-selling comic for 10 years. It wasn't until, they did the new X-Men, and they made them a venture team, going off into space, fighting, going and fighting dinosaurs, that the X-Men became a top-tier comic. They did away with they started out in identity politics. It wasn't selling. X-Men was actually canceled. They brought it back as an adventure team, traveling the world, traveling space, fighting dinosaurs, doing cool stuff. Yes, fighting bad mutants, but they might as well have been Doctor Dooms and Kangs and everything. And then, getting involved in space intrigue and imperial politics. And then when they started bringing back the identity politics, I don't know. That's when they lost me again. But I ramble. 30 minutes talking about this comic. I'm sorry for taking so long. But thanks a lot. I'll see you tomorrow with another video. And Tuesday night, I'm going to have Ron Geronimo of Alternate Comics Blood Realm. We're going to talk about his comic. And then Wednesday, we're going to have Jeff Hatcher, one of my subscribers for old time, one of my original subscribers. He's been waiting patiently for like 2 months, and he's going to do a back issue bonanza of his own. So Jeff, I hope you haven't been, salivating, wanting to read those comics and been holding him off for for this video. So I apologize. I pushed him back a few times because other people they could only talk at this particular time. While Jeff was like, yeah, sure, he's a good guy, true gentleman. So thanks a lot. I'll see you tomorrow with another video.